The Atlanta Falcons become Super Bowl contenders in 2025 with these 5 moves, and the last move is the single most important move to get Atlanta to their first Super Bowl in a decade. The Falcons had a disappointing 2024 where they came into the season big favorites to win the NFC South but fell short due to shortcomings from Kirk Cousins at quarterback and their defense. The talent this roster has, though, is undeniable, and now with Michael Penix Jr. starting for the Falcons in 2025, the ceiling of this team raises exponentially. However, even with the talent at quarterback with Penix, this team still needs to make more moves this offseason to give themselves the best opportunity to truly compete for the NFC's top spot and to have an appearance in the Super Bowl. With that being said, the first move the Falcons need to make to turn themselves into Super Bowl contenders is to re-sign Drew Dalman in free agency. Keeping this offensive line intact to protect Penix has got to be a huge priority for the Falcons next year. They ranked the 11th best line in football last year per PFF, even with Dalman missing a lot of time. Dalman, when healthy, was the 4th best center in the league last year PFF, and at 26 years old, he's got a lot of great football ahead of him. A great young center is super important for a good young quarterback in Penix, who in limited action last year, obviously just 3 starts, did have the 6th highest passing grade in the NFL last year per PFF. Anybody who actually watched Penix last year and wasn't just a box score merchant saw it. This guy can absolutely spin it. With the receivers and running backs and the other offensive line they have to surround him, guys like Chris Lindstrom, who was one of the highest graded linemen in football last year, veteran tackles like Jake Matthews and Caleb McGarry, and a guard in Matthew Bergeron, who improved a lot last year, I think re-signing Dalman becomes a crucial part of this offseason to help the Falcons take that next step. This leads me to my second move that will turn the Falcons into Super Bowl contenders for the 2025 season, and that's trade, but probably cut quarterback Kirk Cousins. First of all, the Falcons front office and Arthur Blank met with Kirk, who said that he wants out of Atlanta, which is not surprising at all. The Falcons said they aren't going to cut him, and maybe they don't. However, Kirk has a roster bonus where if he's on the roster on March 17th, he gets $10 million, and if he's cut, the Falcons save $10 million. But that $10 million isn't for this year's cap bill, it's for the 2026 cap bill, so it doesn't really help them save space for this year, where they are 30th in the NFL in cap space, currently over the cap by $5.3 million. What all that means is it doesn't really benefit them to cut Cousins this year, and if they do, it's going to be a lot of dead money. But they're probably going to have to anyway, because I don't see anyone trading for Cousins before that March 17th date, and saving $10 million on next year's cap could be big for a talented team like Atlanta next year. Second of all, there's people that are going to use the fact that they're moving on from Kirk as a justification to double down on their opinion that signing Kirk and drafting Penix was the dumbest move ever, and where ideally you don't have to deal with all the dead money Kirk is leaving on the roster. The impact that he had on Penix personally, football-wise, and just allowing him to sit right away is profound. You don't believe me? Google the clip of Penix talking about what Kirk Cousins has done for him. And after watching that, if you don't think that Cousins benefited Penix tremendously, you are out of your mind. Granted, $180 million is a lot of money to pay for a glorified mentor for your young quarterback, but if Penix turns into the franchise quarterback you drafted him to be, it was all worth it. But nonetheless, Cousins wants to keep playing, and it would benefit the Falcons financially next year to move on, so I think we will see him cut before that March 17th deadline. But that leads me directly into my third move that will help the Falcons be Super Bowl contenders in 2025. That's trading or cutting defensive tackle Grady Jarrett. Jarrett has been a great defensive tackle in this league, one of the best in football from 2017 to 2022, but at 31 years old and worth a $20 million cap hit this year, even a player like Jarrett, who was a big part of the Falcons' 2016 Super Bowl run, is probably not worth it anymore. At that number, I doubt there are any takers for Jarrett's services. Cutting Jarrett saves the Falcons $16 million on the cap this year, which, like I mentioned before, they need to get some sort of savings, and there's always restructures, but I think their best bet is just cut Jarrett. Other cuts for the Falcons that could save them a good amount of money include David Onyemata, Caleb McGarry, and Caden Ellis, because all of those players are over the age of 30 starting next year, and like I mentioned, the Falcons could get some good savings from them as well, but not as much as they could get from Jarrett, and all of them played well last year, and I doubt the Falcons move on from any of them. Maybe one, but I bet they all stay. Plus, there's a lot of depth in free agency and in the draft this year on the defensive line, so I think it makes a lot of sense for them to move on from Jarrett this year. Now, Falcons fans, I know you are now very nervous that I'm taking maybe the most famous player from a defense that last year was bottom half in the league in pretty much everything that matters, but I promise you it's for a reason. And my last 2 moves are going to fix that defense, perfectly leading me into my 4th move that will turn the Falcons into Super Bowl contenders in 2025. You're going to sign Hassan Reddick to a 1-year deal in free agency. First of all, like I mentioned, there's a lot of D-line and edge depth in free agency this year. A couple guys that I mentioned in a previous video that I had going to Carolina, I'd also like a lot for Atlanta. Those guys would be Azeez Ojulari and Baron Browning, both 26 years old and younger, and you could get them for 2-year, $15-ish million deals according to SpotTrack's market value. But as far as Reddick goes, Falcons fans might be nervous with another veteran edge rusher after the Matthew Judon experiment failed miserably last year as well, especially because of all the Reddick drama last year, but I really believe believe this will work. Last year, we saw Reddick get traded because he wanted a new contract. Then he didn't get a new contract from the team that traded for him, so he sat out. Then eventually he came back after losing a bunch of money, and when he came back, he wasn't good and helped contribute to a disappointing Jets season last year. Now, I'm about a minute into explaining why the Falcons should sign Hassan Reddick, and I haven't given a single positive reason why. Here goes. First of all, he needs to recover his value and reputation this year because of what happened last year. And he's got a ton of incentive to ball out in 2024, so he should be highly motivated. And Reddick, before the debacle last year, was one of the most consistently great edge rushers in the league. From 2020 to 2023, in those 4 seasons, he had at least 11 sacks, which was top 15 in the NFL in sacks for all 4 of those years, including 16 in 2022, which was the second most in the NFL, and 12 and a half in 2020, which was the 4th most in the NFL. If Reddick can regain that form, he can transform an edge rush unit for Atlanta that ranked 3rd worst in the league in pressure rate at just 28.4% and in sacks at 31. Plus, last year went so poorly, you got to figure he's going to come at a really solid price as well. SpotTrack has his market value at 1 year, $11.5 million. That's something that works well for Atlanta with where their cap situation is at, and I think it fits Atlanta's desperate need for a big-time pass rusher as well. Before I get to my 5th and final move, if you like these type of videos, do me a favor and subscribe to the channel. Us here as a collective at Between the Uprights have a ton more content coming your way, especially this offseason. We've got draft, free agency, predictions, hot takes, whatever you want, as long as it's related to the NFL, we got it. So if you want more of this, subscribe and we got you. And with that being said, the most important move to turn the Falcons into Super Bowl contenders in 2025, and this is going to set them up to be the same in 2026 and going forward as well, is an all-defensive 2025 NFL draft. 7 of the last 8 first-round picks picked by Atlanta have been on offense, and the Falcons sent only defensive scouts to the combine this year, showing you the confidence they have in the offense to perform at a high level, but also showing you they need defense. And unfortunately for the Falcons, they have limited picks to turn this defense's fortunes around. But here's how they solved that, and here's what I did in my favorite mock draft for Atlanta to solve that. I traded down from 15 to 20 with Denver. I got their 3rd, the 84th overall pick in this year's draft, a 5th, the 192nd overall pick from Arizona in this year's draft, and a 3rd round pick next year. And at the 20th pick, I decided to pick Will Johnson, the lockdown corner out of Michigan. Now, he's been sliding in the draft because of injury concerns, and obviously nobody likes injury concerns, but if you want to win the Super Bowl, you got to take risks. Just like we did with Reddick, we're doing it with Johnson. He is a lockdown corner when he's on the field, and if you pair him with AJ Terrell on the outside at corner, look out. Now, to the 46th pick, I might try trading down from 46 to later in the 2nd to try to pick up another 3rd and potentially do this because the D-line depth in the draft this year is great. You can find really good D-line in rounds 4 through 7 this year, but I am throwing all that out the window if James Pierce ends up falling to this pick in the 2nd round for character issues. Pierce was projected to be the number 1 overall pick before this year, and he's got all the talent in the world for an edge rusher. The character issues are a massive red flag, but if he's there because of it at the 46th overall pick in the 2nd round, I think there he becomes very much worth it. And even though your first 2 picks and Hassan Reddick are pretty high risk, if they work out, that changes the trajectory of your franchise for the next 5 years, and I think that's a chance you got to be willing to take if you're Atlanta. And if you don't like Pierce in the 2nd round because of the character issues, again, there's lots of defensive linemen available, and you could pick another one there in the 2nd round, but with the 84th overall pick that we acquired from the Broncos earlier, I like someone like Jordan Phillips out of Maryland that can come in there and help shut down the run game for Atlanta right away. At just 20 years old, he has a ton of talent and can already be a big-time run stuffer if you put him at nose tackle. I also talked about him on a previous video, definitely needing to work on his pass rush a bit, but the run stuff will play. Falcons fans, say going into next year, you have AJ Terrell and a healthy Will Johnson at corner. You have a motivated Hassan Reddick and a motivated and now hungry James Pierce on the edge. With a 20-year-old nose tackle run stuffer and Jordan Phillips on the inside, again, all of this is high risk, but Atlanta, we're in the business of winning rings. That's what it takes. Calculated risks win rings. You combine all those moves we just made with the offensive talent, Drake London on the outside, Bijan Robinson in the backfield, and a young quarterback like Michael Penix who can sling it. I am stoked if I'm an Atlanta Falcons fan come 2025. And I am not at all shocked if the Falcons are Super Bowl contenders in 2025 and for years to come. I'm Matt from Between the Uprights, and that's going to be it for me. Peace.